I'm Jeremy. Was chief data scientist for a small software company that specialized in hardware and software inventory. So I was used to dealing with big data, and that was all very interesting. But in my private life, I've cooked since I was a child, and about 6 years ago, I thought, well, I wonder if I can make beer. I can follow a recipe. I know the importance of cleanliness. I know the importance of measuring the ingredients and getting everything right. And it was about the time that beer went through a bit of a renaissance with the influx from American West Coast IPAs, from New Zealand, from Australia. And there was a big sort of home brewing revolution. And I thought, I'll give this a go. I'll give this a go. So I did. I got the ingredients, and I made the beer, and I put it in a big bucket with an airlock, and I put it somewhere that was reasonably warm, and I left it for 2 weeks, and it was bubbling away nicely and giving off a beery smell, which my partner didn't enjoy very much. And after 2 weeks, I bottled it and had it carbonated, and then came the big day, the big reveal that my hard work was about to be realized. And I cracked open a nice cold bottle of a West Coast IPA that I'd made, and it looked all right in the glass, and it was sparkling, and the cold drips were running down the outside of the glass, and I thought, I'm going to enjoy this. And I took a big swig, and it was foul. It was absolutely disgusting. It reminded me of the beer that my dad made when I was a child. Some of you may have made beer at university. Some of you may have made it as... It does the job. If the job is just to get you drunk, then it does the job, but it's not a pleasant experience. It's not a pleasant experience. And so, given that I've got quite a high regard for my cooking skills, I thought, well, what's gone wrong here? What's the problem? And I asked around, and I ended up at a brewing shop in Swindon. A brewing shop's the wrong word. It's a warehouse, a massive warehouse, and a guy called Rob there. And he asked me some questions about how I did it and where I'd stored the beer when it was fermenting and so on. And he said, the principal key to making drinkable beer is temperature control. I said, well, it was fermenting, it was bubbling away. He said, yes, but do you understand how yeast work? And I said, no. So well, what happens is you need to apply a little bit of heat to start with just to get the yeast going. But what yeast do, they do three things, basically. They fart CO2, they piss alcohol, and they generate heat. So if you've put it in a warm place to start with, then as the yeast start to work, your beer will get hotter and hotter and hotter. And what that does is it introduces off flavors to the beer. So things like butterscotch, things like tannins, things like that. So the secret to making good beer is to control the temperature really accurately to the yeast that you're using. And different yeasts require different temperatures. So I thought, okay, I'll listen to the expert on this. So I went off, and like a lot of home and craft brewers do, I bought a second-hand fridge. So imagine now I've got a fridge, the back of a truck, and I brought it home, and I've gone to Wickes and bought 2 tube heaters. The tube heaters went in the bottom with the cable running through the drain hole in the back of the fridge. And then I bought a controller, a simple bang bang controller with a temperature probe on it. And what that does is it reads the temperature from the beer, and bang, switches heat on, bang, switches cold on, bang, switches everything off. And that way you control the temperature of the beer, and you get, I'll blow my own trumpet here. If you make beer properly, you can easily surpass what you can buy in the shops, because it's like making a chocolate cake at home. if you make a chocolate cake at home, you're using good butter, you're using good flour, you're using good chocolate, etc. You can go and get a mix from the supermarket and make that, but it won't be as good as your homemade one. You can go and get a ready-made cake from the supermarket, but it won't be as good as your homemade one. And it's the same with beer. So I've got my fermenting fridge with the bar heaters in the bottom, with a simple controller, and off it goes. And I'm making decent beer, but I'm a data scientist. I'm a data scientist. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on. So I started to rig together a very complicated, ramshackle, PC-based, open internet, all the rest of it. And I managed to get to the point where I could sit on a beach in Croatia on holiday and see how my lager was doing 1,500 miles away by a fully compromised home Wi-Fi network, and that was fine. I thought this is all right. And then the next stage on from it was, I thought I'd quite like to automate the process, so to move away from a proprietary controller to something where I can actually see what the inputs and outputs are and get far more data from it. So I started to build on that. But I'm not a cautious individual by nature, but I draw the line at messing with mains electricity. So the idea of putting relays anywhere filled me with horror. So what I did was I started to play around with these cheapo remote control plugs that you can get, not the Wi-Fi ones. They're not the Wi-Fi ones. They're just the really cheap ones you might get for your Christmas lights or something else. They usually come with a remote control, and they operate on 433 megahertz. So when I started to build the software to drive my ramshackle system, I made sure I had a 433 megahertz transmitter receiver in the kit. And what that would do, when the probe picked up the fact that the temperature was over, it would say, okay, I need to switch cold on. I'll send the 24-bit character string to switch the plug on, and the plug would go on, and that was that. But at no point did I think that what I'd got rigged up with wires, sealing wax, open internet, and all the rest of it was ever going to be anything other than just a hobbyist ramshackle thing. So one day, completely by chance, I came across an article about a thing called an ESP8266 machine control unit, which is, it's a processor basically, but it's a processor that has got Wi-Fi on it. It's only got 4 megs of storage, of which, in order to do an over-the-air update, you can only use 2 megs, because you've got to have 2 megs to hold the image as it comes down. And so it's, in terms of programming, it's quite a tight squeeze to get anything into it. And I started to play around with that. Eventually, this is what I sell, called my BrewBot. It's black box. It's got a relay socket in it. It's got 2 probe sockets, and it's got a pressure sensor socket in it. It's a fairly simple device. I've got one here that I've taken to pieces, and I can sort of show you the components of it. So that's the transmitter, 433 megahertz transmitter. That's a 433 megahertz receiver. This is the ESP8266 machine control unit. Now I need to, so this costs less than $3. Yeah, so, and that's the key to the whole thing, is the cheapness of the components. The last thing is a Bluetooth low energy module. And the boards are made in China. They come like this. All the components are just plug and play. The boxes are made in England, and that's what my BrewBot is. It's got a phone interface. It's got a rudimentary local web interface, and that's what it is. And what does it do? It's through temperature probes like these, which are they're effectively network probes. So you can put up to, well, in theory, up to 100 on a single loop. So if you think about it like a network cable, they're each addressable. So that's quite handy, because you can put more probes on than you've got socket holes. So I got myself to the point where I got a working prototype of the device with the ESP8266, the 433 megahertz transmitter receiver, Bluetooth, yada yada, and a box, which didn't look as nice as this because I had to drill all the holes in it myself, and that was messy. What I did find was that,
oh, this is so interesting. I'm so happy I came. Oh my God. This is one of, I used to build these kind of things, and I know exactly what you are talking about. This is amazing.
Yeah, so you end up,
good.
So you end up with a situation where you've got a round hole in the front of your box, which is for where the USB, it's the old-fashioned, well, now old-fashioned, it's not USB-C, it's the one before. So you've got a round hole in the front, and you need to brand your box, and you need to tidy the hole up. So I found a company that did what are called fascia graphics. So I bought a whole load of these labels, which have got a die cut hole in the front, which conveniently masks the round hole in the front of the box, so that it presents professionally, I think. So the interesting things about this so far. So the first thing was I wanted to know more about the data. That was the driving force, and I sort of got that through my prototype, string, sealing wax, all the rest of it. Then when I thought I might be able to commercialize this, I needed to create something which looked relatively commercial. I needed to get the price right, and then I needed to test it. And when I was at the brew warehouse sometime later, I got talking to a fireman who was there, who brewed beer. Steve was his name, and we got on really well. And we asked what each other were doing, and I said, "This is what I'm doing." He said, "Oh, I'd love to see what that is." Anyway, he turned out to be my prototyper. So he agreed that I could go down to his house in Bristol, and he would let me put my device into his brew, and we'd monitor what we could see from that. So I went down there. He was using a Bang Bang manual controller like I did when I started out. And because if you're going to make a beer properly from scratch, it's a day's effort just to get to the liquid that you're going to ferment. So people are naturally quite precious about spoiling that. They don't want to put themselves in a situation where all of a sudden the mad professor who's introduced this new bit of technology to them has screwed up their beer. So he insisted that whilst I could put my kit in, he was going to control it his way until he was confident with it, which fair enough. So I went down, put the device in, put it on, and then we started to monitor what it was producing. So I'm going to share my screen now, if I can find the right spreadsheet. Okay, here we go. So this is Stephen's first beer, and basically my BrewBot sends information once every minute back to the cloud. So obviously we're not seeing every minute plots here, but we're seeing plots that are based on a minute. Now the target temperature for his beer was 20 degrees. And I started to look at, when we were looking at it, we because he wouldn't let me put the probe in his beer. I just had the probe in the fridge. So just in the air in the fridge. And as I started to look at it, I was thinking, goodness me, the control system he's got is dreadful, because, you know, some of these are going down near to 15 degrees, 5 degrees off of his set point. How is this right? And sometimes it's going, you know, a couple of degrees above his set point. At first, I thought, oh, it's a scam. All of these controllers are a scam. They're not very accurate, not very accurate. Brilliant. There's a place for me in the market. I can exploit this. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that wasn't what I was seeing here. It wasn't what I was seeing here. And it took probably about 3 or 4 weeks to realize that what I was seeing was the effect of yeast fermenting and generating heat, the heat generating a cool input, and because the probe was just in the air, it was very susceptible to small changes in temperature. So it wasn't, as it would normally be, either in a thermo well, so a sort of hollow metal tube that goes into the fermenting beer to get as close to the temperature of the beer as you can, or it would be sort of stuck onto the side with some air wrap around it to isolate it from the ambient temperature. And so I sort of realized that, okay, what I'm getting here is the fridge temperature. I'm not getting the beer temperature. If I strap it to the side, I'll get the beer temperature, and that will be fine. So that was the first lesson. But then I came across an article. I don't expect anyone to read this, but there aren't many places, you know, the internet's a fascinating place, and you think there can't be anything you can't find. Well, this took some finding, because there's not a lot of work been done about the effects of fermentation on heat. People know that it exists, but there's not a lot of work. But I came across this, which is the Midland Counties Institute of Brewing. And it's a presentation from this guy, Adrian J. Brown, who's the vice president of the society, but he's also a professor at Birmingham University. He's a professor of malting and brewing in the days when they had such things. And this is 1901. As I say, I'm not going to go any further than that, other than to say that when I read it, what I realized was that this outlying information, the stuff which I hadn't intended to collect and which was very confusing to start with, was actually telling me in a sort of reverse engineer way how much work was being done by the yeast. Because effectively the fermentation fridge acts as a thermic bomb. In the middle, you've got a vessel which contains the fermenting beer, and around that is an ambient environment which changes in order to keep the beer at a particular temperature. So what we did was to then start to look at thermodynamics. And I won't try, I'll explain it probably badly, and if anyone knows more about thermodynamics, then excuse me for getting it wrong. But basically, there is a given amount of energy required to move 1 liter of water by 1 degree centigrade. And if you know, and I think it's either a joule or something like that, so in order to do that work, you need a joule of energy. And if you know what your ambient temperature is for that 1 liter of water, and you know what the temperature variations have been over time, you know how much work has been done. And if you know how much work has been done, then you know how much heat has been generated by the fermenting yeast. And if you know how much heat has been generated by the fermenting yeast, are you all with me so far? Then what you also know is how much glucose the yeast has eaten. So effectively, it's a bit like, looking at a car and saying, the car does 20 miles per gallon, it's used 3.5 gallons, ergo it must have gone this far. Now, why is that important? It's important in a number of ways. One is that when you produce a beer, you're aiming for a specific gravity, the point at which you've fermented out enough of the glucose to give you the sort of taste that you want and the strength that you want. Obviously, once it's used up all of the sugar, it'll be a very dry beer and it will have reached its maximum alcoholic content. But if you start a brew off and you've zeroed your data collection, and then as the brew goes on, you're collecting information about how much work has been done by the yeast, and you know what your starting gravity was, you can work out at any given point what your gravity is now. So let's just say you started your beer at 1.056, which would be a typical pale ale, and you were going to end it at 1.012, which would probably give you about 5% proof alcohol content in there. The way that you would have traditionally dealt with that, excuse me, would have been to have taken samples and used a hydrometer with a floaty thing which would measure the amount of alcohol. But every time you do that, you're risking the fact that you might get air into your beer, and B, you're probably losing 1/4 of a litre every time. So if you took 4 measures throughout the whole piece, you'd lose 1 litre over time, and you're brewing 20 litres, so you've just lost 5% of your output. The other thing is that whilst there are 2 other main electronic methods on the market for measuring specific gravity electronically, both of which rely on a float, effectively, which you put in the beer at the beginning, and the angle of the dangle tells it what its specific gravity is based on the viscosity of the liquid through the sugar side of things. So as this revelation came to me, I realized that by having a number of sensors, if you had a beer sensor and an ambient sensor, both working in concert, with 1 litre of water for the ambient sensor to sit in, and if you started from the beginning, you could see what your specific gravity was at any given time. And it's a feature of the product. It's all there. Now, in order to discover that, since I'm not a thermodynamicist, I used Fiverr. I don't know if you've come across Fiverr. It's like a bazaar for getting people to do things. And I had a Pakistani doctorate student who did all the thermodynamic calculus for me. I think it cost me $150 to do, and it was money well spent because I didn't understand it, but he did. So that was useful. But of course, it's all very well having a theoretical system where you think, okay, based on all that I know, this should tell me. So what I had to do was let's just shut that down a second, find the next one, is to use what's called a tilt. So the tilt, if I got a tilt here, yeah. So this is a tilt made by an American company called Tilt. It was a Kickstarter, and they've done very, very well. But basically, you drop that into the beer, the angle tells you what the specific gravity is. So I bought one of these, and I did a side-by-side test. So all the conditions were perfect on my side. I put the tilt in, I set my rig going with the 1 litre of water and went through. And you can see there that the tilt specific gravity, which is the blue line, against the estimated specific gravity. So I know it works. What's perhaps more interesting is that over time, and I'm sure you all find it if you work in data, you become familiar with the shapes of data when you look at them, particularly charts. When you're familiar with a particular process or anything else, you can look at a chart and you can see what's going wrong, what's going right, etc. And what you find, as far as brewing is concerned, is that, I mean, obviously this is showing the chart all the way through from start to finish, and it's showing it at quite a wide timescale, which is why it's quite choppy. But when you see this live, when the lines are much more straight, is that when a brew starts, the yeast starts off aerobically. It needs to have oxygen to start. And what that tends to do is to demand heat. So you'll see this blue ambient line go above your set temperature, because the yeast are needing oxygen, they're demanding oxygen. But then they get to the point where the fermentation starts and they shift from aerobic to anaerobic. They don't need oxygen anymore. They're now producing carbon dioxide. They've got everything they need. So they start to generate heat. So what you see is that the curve starts to fall below the set temperature. So my set temperature there is 20 degrees. As the fermentation starts, I'll see the ambient temperature start to drop beneath my set temperature for the beer. And I can look at a chart in like 12 hours after I've pitched the yeast and know that my fermentation started. I don't need to look at anything else, because I can see that the line is now, the ambient temperature is now dropped under my set temperature, and off it goes. And depending on the beer that's being created, so this line here, so you can see here that this has gone down to a maximum of 4 degrees under the set temperature during the process. My prototyper, Steve, did a heavy alcohol brown ale. And this was in the early days when I was watching it, and the temperature, unfortunately, I don't have the chart anymore, but the temperature dropped to very nearly 10 degrees below the set line, which meant that the fermentation was really active. It was producing a lot of heat. And I said to him, you're going to have a blowout. So a blowout is when the beer is so active that it pushes up through the bubbler and out into your fridge, and you end up with a nasty brown mess in his case. And sure enough, 2 hours later, it blew out. And so whilst I have customers who use this, they use it with the tilt, etc., etc., I always say to them, spend some time looking at the chart each time. Look at the way that it goes, learn how to interpret the data that you're seeing on the chart. Now, where am I up to? Let's have a think. So I sell these all over the world. So my biggest customer base is probably the Nordic countries, where beer is quite expensive. So there are a lot of home brewers. I've got 2 resellers, one in Norway, one in Finland, and I sell a lot, a lot into Finland and Denmark. Australia and New Zealand are quite big. And because I've chosen these cheapo remote control plugs, I have no components that are country dependent. So the power source is a standard wall wart that delivers 5 volts. And the plugs are the things you can buy off of eBay. So there is nothing that I produce that isn't compatible anywhere in the world, which is great news, because I can sell everywhere. And typically, so this is a New Zealand customer. He's got his I can't even see where my brewbot is, but he's got a tablet on the top of his fridge so that he can read it as he goes in there, as well as on his phone. I've got a guy who works on North Sea oil rig who does 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So when he's at home, he makes a brew, and when he's away, he watches it and he can change the temperature of it. It's got let's get a bigger one than that. So it has a phone UI to give the beer a name, target temperature, its original gravity, all the rest of it. What it also does is that there are a number of well, how best to call them, recipe sites. So there are a number of recipe sites. There are 2 big American ones and 1 big Norwegian one. And basically what you do on those is you can create a recipe for a beer, and it will tell you what the specific gravity is likely to be, what the color is going to be, what the flavors are going to be. But I send data to those apps so that my customers who use those can also see their fermentation at the same time through those apps. So it's quite an integrated piece of kit. It sells for 55 quid, so it's not cheap, but it's not expensive either. And the interface, again, I didn't think I was in the business of making phone interfaces, so I use a product called Blink. You may have heard of it. It's a sort of drag and drop UI, and you code in the locations into the software, and off it goes. And it's worked very well. There are limitations over the interface, but the limitations are better than the alternative, because I don't think I could code on I didn't think I could code on an ESP8266 chip, but there you go, you learn all the time. What else did I say about this? So Mirella, the anomalies weren't really your sort of anomalies, but it was anomalous in the first place, because we got information back that we didn't expect and we didn't understand, and we had to find out what it was. What else can you do with this? So some
Congratulations. Yeah, this is amazing.
Thank you.
In fact, I'm so happy to be here today. Wow. Wow. This is exactly the ambition of every data scientist. We don't want to be the edge, the end developer. We want to see the whole process and to be able to control. And thank you so much for taking time out to explain the business. I mean, what are we measuring? Or because now we can have a better view about the data. I even saw one outlier. Anyway, please continue.
So, I mean, I launched this in 2017. And it was an accidental launch, to be honest. So I got the equipment was there. I started to understand where I could get my stock from. I'd even built a web page, which I didn't think I'd published, and I'd got a PayPal account set up at the back of it, but I didn't think I'd published anything. And then one day in November 2017, I had a notification came up, PayPal, 45 quid in your account. Oh, this is a scam. This is a scam. No one's sending me money from PayPal. This is nonsense. So I didn't delete it, but I thought, I'm not opening that. And then I realized that, so the original price, when it was rather different box from this, was £45. I realized that this was my selling price. And I looked it up, and it was an American guy, and he bought the first saleable version, and I was unable to fulfill it. I was probably 6 weeks away from actually having a product I could walk out of the door. So I wrote to him and I said, look, I don't know how you came across the site, and thank you for buying the first one, but I can't fulfill it for 6 weeks. So I'm going to give you your money back and you can have it for free. So I never actually sold my first unit. I gave it away. And that it was yeah, quite astonishing, to be honest with you. It was one of those moments in your life where you think, oh my God, I've done it. Now, I haven't done it yet because I'd like to sell hundreds of thousands of these, but nonetheless, it was a very, very special moment, very special moment. So where am I going to go with it? I think I've exhausted the functionality that I can get out of the box. There are all sorts of things on it now. So, for example, if you were making a lager, a lager has to go through a number of different temperature stages as it ferments. So I put in here effectively profiles. So you can say, I want you to keep it at this temperature until the specific gravity reaches this, or the temperature reaches that. And then when that's done, switch to this temperature for however many days. And when that's done, so it's just a program of steps that the thing runs through. There've been some hairy moments along the way. I can remember a very distressed American customer who was a traveling salesman, and he'd got two 20-litre kegs of beer in his what's called a keezer. So instead of it being a fridge, it's a freezer, but it does the same thing. And at the time, I put a sort of idiot bar on that said you can't put the temperature down to 0 degrees. But what I didn't do was to say that you can't put the temperature down to -10 degrees, which he'd done. And the trouble was that once it was at -10, the software didn't allow him to change it. So he was in his hotel bedroom, hundreds of miles from home, watching his beer turn into dirty, great big beer lollies as they were slowly freezing in his freezer. Now, because I can do over-the-air software updates, and B, because I can get into, if someone gives me their login and password, I can drive their rig from anywhere in the world, and it always staggers me that it's just as quick driving a New Zealander's kit as it is mine, which is not 30 meters away. So I was able to very, very quickly, late at night, change the software, upload it to the server, go into his rig, download the software, and switch it all off for him. But it's a hairy old business when you're responsible for someone else's beer. And people have said to me, why don't you do like vivariums for reptiles, snakes, lizards, fish, all of that? No, I do not want to be responsible for the death of someone's pet python. I don't want some big hairy bugger coming around to my house threatening to throttle me because his snakes have all died because of my kit. So where am I taking this? I'm taking it away from beer, and I'm taking it into an area which is sort of data-ish. It's sort of data-ish, but it's not as data as this. I'm going to put it out on a Kickstarter. It's called Lecky the Vampire Killer. That's not going to be its real name, but that's its sort of working title at the moment. And what that's going to be. So I'm going to leverage the chassis that I've got. I'm going to leverage the chip, the MCU, but not the Bluetooth that I've got. I'm going to leverage the 433 megahertz transmitter and receiver. So what this is now, with different software, is a device for switching on and off cheap remote control plugs. And it's all about what are called vampire power devices. So your TV, set-top box, your Sonos system, phone chargers, all of those things that we tend to leave on, like computers, let the computer go to sleep, screens go to sleep, everything else, all of those things draw power. And whilst 12 months ago, none of us gave a monkeys about how much electricity cost, but come October, when the price of electricity will very nearly have doubled since last year, a device which drains perhaps half a p an hour is going to drain 12p a day, £3 a year, £4 a year. A television left on standby will drain 40 quid's worth of electricity in a year at new prices. So you can very quickly get to sums of 150, 200. If you've got children, even worse. So this is really just a means of dealing with devices which we put on standby, which we should really turn off at the mains. And I've become an energy Nazi over the last 6 months. I got an application called Hugo. I don't know if any of you use Hugo. It's a freebie, and what it does is it links to your smart meter. So you need to use a credit card or a debit card just to prove your address. There's no money involved. And this isn't my application. I've got no skin in this game whatsoever. But I live in a 4-bedroom house. I spend most of the day at work and not in the house. But so my energy company, EDF, told me at the beginning of the year that I would need to pay £195 a month in order to cope with the increases in prices, etc. So my average monthly bill, so I'll go back to March because that's a reason, it was quite chilly then. My bill in March was £86 for gas and electricity. And it's the summer now, but there's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't be able to keep that certainly around about 100 quid as an average across the year. So I think I've got an opportunity to leverage the technology, the software, because it's mostly reusable. It's been built in a modular fashion. I can just drag it out and plug and play it. It's not great looking at a telephone, but I can give you a view of what it looks like. You see that reasonably well. So I've got 5 zones. So I've got things like the TV, lights, PC, printer, all the rest of it. And each one of those can be programmed to come on or go off at particular times every day or 1 or 2 days a week. You can switch off whole panels at once. If you've got a guest, so if I have someone in my guest bedroom, I disable them. So there's a disable button so they can use the remote control in the room, because the way that the software works, both on my Brewbot and this, is that it continually sends every minute the signal that it's supposed to. So if it's an off signal, it will send an off signal every minute. So if you don't have the disable piece in there, someone's going to go into the guest bedroom, switch on the lights, and a minute later they're going to switch off again, which I don't think.
Did you buy this idea for the electric? Was that born out of the prices going up this year, or did you have that lined up already?
No, it was all around the prices going up this year. To be honest, it was when EDF wrote to me and said, we're going to charge you 195 quid a month. I think you're bloody not. You are not. So I then made strenuous efforts to get a smart meter installed on both the gas and the electricity side, which was a struggle in itself. And then once it's the same old with data. Once you've got data, you can monitor, you can manage, you can change behaviors. It's simple as that. If you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't got the data, how can you change? You can't. It's simple. So that's sort of my story, really.
When
So sorry, yeah. One question, Jeremy, right? First of all, like thanks for all the detailed explanation, right? But like related to the last device that you showed and like how you're using it in terms of like controlling your, I would say like behavior, right? Electricity behavior. So like, is this device is like per electronic component, let's say TV, fridge, or maybe some other electronic component, or like the same device can be used across all these appliances?
Anything which uses one of these plugs. You just put this between the mains and the device, and this will switch it off. And this comes with a very tiny overhead, whereas a Wi-Fi plug, and this is one of the reasons for not using a Wi-Fi plug, a Wi-Fi plug effectively has to have a router in there and consumes more electricity possibly than your cell.
So let's say if I'm having like 5 appliances, right? So I need to use the 5 of these switches.
No, 5 of the plugs, yes.
5 of these plugs, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the ones I recommend are a product called Renkforce, Renkforce, and you can buy 5 of them for around about £27-28. So they work out between £5 and £6 per unit. So I would anticipate, if you've got a couple of TVs, a set-top box, etc., you're going to break even in 6 to 9 months. Because I'm not going to sell this for 55 quid. It's probably going to be 30. So it's not, and also that's the thing that I didn't mention, because it's got the receiver in it. If you've got any of these plugs knocking around already with a remote control, then you can put the unit into learn mode, put the remote control up against the side, press the on button, press the off button, and the controller will learn the signal. So it's not restricted to any particular plug, as long as it's 433 megahertz. So if you've got ones that you've had knocking around for years, or buy second-hand ones from eBay, whatever, it's just significantly cheaper than the alternatives.
When do you think you'll have the electric ones ready to sell?
I think probably middle of August. I need to get it out there in time for people to start worrying about the October price increases. This is a fear play.
Yeah, well, it's going to be all over the news, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, Morella, what did you say?
I wanted to ask, did you need a special license for the transmitter and receiver? No. You mentioned the 450 something megahertz, probably.
433.
Yeah. So does it interfere? I'm sorry, I'm not. It's a long time since I was playing with toys.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but I know for some apps you actually need license.
Yeah. This falls within. I had to check this out right at the beginning. This falls within the EU regulations. It's not one of the prohibited frequencies. It's the same sort of thing that garage doors go on. And you can buy, because so all the way along I didn't want to get into anything which smacked of regulatory issues.
Good.
So by allowing the user to use plugs that they can legally buy in their country, the regulatory issues have been dealt with by the plug manufacturer rather than me. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry for the stupid question. Yeah,
No,
actually,
no,
it makes a lot of sense. Yes, I should have reasoned it because we already.
It's not a stupid question at all. It's people ask it, and
because the frequencies can interfere. You mentioned you can control the TV. So every device has a different. And yes, sometimes you may even get some interference and probably some signal, but you can see the data, right? You can see your patterns. So. Definitely, you are in control. Yeah.
In all of the 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, blimey, nearly 5 years of my brewbot, I've only ever had 2 situations where plugs were switching on and off as if by ghost, and both of those were in blocks of flats where someone else had got the same plugs with the same frequency. And I think it would have been more irritating for the other person, because the other person would have switched on their TV, and then a minute later, if person B using my kit wants that plug switched off, the TV would go off, and then they switch it back on again, and a minute later it would go off again. Yeah, but equally the same way, every time the other person switched it on, his beer would go on hot or whatever. So yeah,
tell us a bit. This is amazing. In fact, I need time to process. I'm still in awe. Thank you. This is amazing. Oh my God. Could you tell us more a bit about the transducers, how those probes, because all of these, they probably have, do they need calibration? Do you use them, just buy them and that's it? I'm interested in cheese. My favorite thing is cheese. I'm a Romanian.
Yeah.
I'm a Romanian, and we have amazing cheese. It's called Cașcaval. You might have met. So I think this, and not only this, probably cakes and some other things, but for the cheese, they are so sensitive because it's bacteria. It's and kefir and yogurt. So I'm interested. Okay, if you can tell us more about probes, yeah.
I'm going to disappear for 1 minute to go and get something, and then I'll answer your question. And it is relevant to your question. Just wait.
You want a cheese version of this, Mirella?
Sincerely, it will be a good business. I lived in Africa for like 10 years on another continent entirely. So they don't have cheese. Actually, the Africans do not eat milk like us. I mean, we are used to milk every day. But they have one tribe, Fulanese. They make an amazing cheese. And I wouldn't have been so much interested in cheese. But, I noticed something while I was in Africa. I mean, after coming back, my teeth have changed.
Right.
Okay. I'll come back. We'll speak afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, I'm interested.
So this is, it's a polystyrene box, the sort of thing that delivery drivers use for bringing food.
Wow.
Just a polystyrene box. Inside, I've got one of the temperature probes. I actually use this one that I brought to show you. That lives in there. And I use this for two things. I use it for proving bread. I make my own bread, and I use it for making. I use it for making yogurt.
Wow, you see.
So we're on the same page, Mirella. We're on the same page on this one.
Amazing.
So the probe is it's a digital probe. It's accurate to, I think it's 0.5.
It's okay, yeah.
Fahrenheit. So it's within most food tolerances. You couldn't use it for medical things, but why would you want to? So you could certainly do cheese with it and have a good degree of control. I've thought of, but I haven't done yet, using it to make kimchi.
Kimchi, yeah. Okay, fantastic. Yes, it's oh my God. I was just telling Billy and the rest of our guests, yeah. I spent 10 years in Africa because the question was, okay, so why cheese? Well, in Africa, people don't eat cheeses or milks or something, but I consumed a certain cheese made by a specific tribe. So the milk was from the cows, the butter was from the cows, but they were like grass-fed, and it was such a high quality. And, I noticed when I came back, my mom, she told me, she said, wow, look at your teeth. I never had any tooth problem for almost 10 years. 10 years. My immunity was so high. And then it just occurred to me, I live in England for like 12 years now.
Yeah.
So I was looking around, where can we get cheese? In Romania, we have, again, good cheese, grass-fed cheese. But if someone, I was thinking, it's not a big deal. The idea is to get quality inputs, always, and to be able to control the process.
Yep, exactly that. And well, you nailed it. It's exactly the same thing. If you use quality ingredients, you'll get a quality end product as long as your process is good.
And what you just said with the data, it's also, oh my God, this is just the beginning. I'm just tuning my head into this, but this is amazing. Wow, congratulations. I look forward to taste that brew.
Has it given you like have you got a very high bar for quality on lagers and beers now? Are you a bit snobby when you go out to have them in pubs? Is it not good enough anymore?
Yeah, I've got to the point where if I go to an Indian restaurant in particular, I mean, I'm quite fortunate. I live quite close to Bradford, and many of the Indian restaurants aren't licensed, so you take your own. But if I go to an Indian or a Chinese restaurant where all there is Kingfisher, Cobra, I won't drink it. I'd rather have water, to be honest, because I know I'm putting empty calories in. I'm not going to enjoy it. Why would I bother?
So if I took you to the pub and they had the regulars, the normal drinks that you'd see on there, I don't know, let's go for the premiums like a Peronis, Estrellas, would you not touch them?
No.
No. Wow.
No.
That's like I think that's you've raised your standards too high. So
I've
now
spoiled myself.
exactly, yeah.
It's
You've based I can go and I can enjoy all matter of beers because I've not had the top.
You're just common, Billy.
Yeah, but I don't want to raise my. It's like if you sleep on an amazing bed that's like the best bed, thousands and thousands of pounds, and you go back to a standard mattress, you can't sleep. But I can sleep like I can sleep fine on a standard mattress because that's what I'm used to.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. But so I'll butt this with it tends to follow that pubs which keep good beers are fun pubs to go to. So I was at a pub a couple of weeks ago with a mate of mine, an ambulance driver in Chesterfield, and there's a pub just down the road from her which looks like two terraced houses have been knocked together, and they've got an amazing selection of beers. And at 9 o'clock a 3-piece reggae band came on playing all the old ska hits. What a cracking night. Now, I wouldn't have got that in the Chesterfield Arms just up the road, which is a rather more sterile traditional pub, which has got loads of mainstream beers, but no, well, let's have a think. What's that? A Nutella stout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you like Nutella, I don't, but I had to have a try of it because it's not very often you come across a beer that tastes like a hazelnut and chocolate spread.
I'm not quite partial to a Guinness. Would you not touch a Guinness?
I would, but for the fact that when I was a young man, I was in the reserves in an Irish regiment, and I got rather too hammered on Guinness. So it's one of those drinks that brings back unpleasant memories for me. But I used to like it before I overindulged.
Sure. Yeah. No. Well, I've been there, not with Guinness yet, but
no. But Guinness is special when you overindulge.
Yeah. I wasn't going to have a drink this evening, but I think I'm quite thirsty now.
Try a West Coast IPA.
I will do. Yeah, I will.
Yeah. And make sure it's in a glass. Don't drink it from a bottle, because half of the enjoyment is from the smell. Those lovely hops.
Right. Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you some how this idea of what exactly? So the data you was a data scientist, and you said to yourself, okay, what could I do now that I know the graphs? I can follow the data. What can I do? Or, I mean, it's such an amazing thing. Data scientist, I'm applying for a job with a short list, yeah. And sincerely, I just graduated from data science last year.
Yeah.
In Salford, I don't have so much experience, but I'm just thinking, I want to know more about the process, how this idea came to you. I mean, how did you combine the data science and this idea? Do you have other ideas?
Yeah,
because probably you do have.
I think in order to, I mean, I have some sort of quite strong views about the way data science is going. Let's have a think about this for a second. So I've got an insatiable sense of curiosity, and I want to understand things. And it sort of doesn't matter really whether it's machines, whether it's data, whether it's anything else. I happen to have acquired a set of skills in data manipulation, data interrogation, interpretation, and manipulation that I can use my life experience in business, in finance, in all sorts of other ways, in the same way as someone might use a spreadsheet. For me, every table in a database is a spreadsheet, and it's linked by a key, and you can connect all of these spreadsheets together, and an organization that runs that way, in control of its data, is going to be a good organization. So the other tag on my description for this session was Ashley Madison. For those of you who don't know what Ashley Madison is, it's an adultery website that was set up some 14, 15 years ago. And I didn't work for them. I got involved when their database was hacked in 2015. And it's a long story, so I'll cut it short. But basically, the hack consisted of a whole lot of financial information, a whole lot of member information, and a whole lot of sort of operational information. It wasn't a complete database, and I have my suspicions as to whether it was hacked or stolen as an inside job, but that's neither here nor there. But what it also had were 187,000 emails of the CEO. So just the CEO, all of his emails for 14 years. And the fascinating thing about Ashley Madison is that you can look at the data, you can read the emails and understand the corporate strategy, and you can see one against the other. So you can see the intent from the senior management team, and then you can see the result in what they do. And for me, that is just such a powerful thing, that you can express the execution of a strategy and the success of that strategy through what you see. And it always staggers me that organizations don't pay enough attention to their data, and there tends to be a big focus around sales data, but their operational data will tell them a whole load of things about the success or otherwise of their strategies, the direction that they're going in, the speed in which they're going at it, and so on. But what you tend to always get is you get little reports of little things of the strategy, and some people will say, oh, this thing's important. Well, it probably isn't actually. It might be important to you, because someone's going to judge you based on whether you've got 16 widgets out today or 14 widgets out today. But actually, when you look at the totality of the whole thing, you can see whether you've got your organization moving in lockstep with your strategy or not, in a way that you just can't with spreadsheets and the like. So I think a sense of curiosity, a sense that the truth is in data.
I'm asking this because I've been looking for a mentor. I look constantly for mentors. I want to learn from other people. I want to get inspired. And unfortunately, right now, when I look around, I see people crying. I have lots of energy. I'm optimistic. I don't see a trouble. And I'm so impressed. I want to follow someone. I want to get inspired. That was the meaning of it. And Cecilia, you are right. What I used to do is to assess people's expressions, the way they express themselves. I can actually detect the intention of the person. Actually, I'm not even ashamed to tell them, look, you don't have this in mind. You are telling me something, I mean, you're actually telling me something else completely.
Yeah.
Yes, you are using these words, but you have a different thing in your mind, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, seeing the big picture or underneath, you are picking some certain words, but you have a different thing in mind. Yeah, thank you so much, Julio.
Curiosity. They
Thank
say it
you.
killed the cat, but I think it just makes for an interesting life. You know, there was an article in the Times a couple of months ago that said data scientist is one of the most boring jobs in the world. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's if you come at it the right way, which is around what am I seeing here? What behaviors am I seeing? What information am I getting? How does it relate to the organization? How does it relate to the process? Whatever it is, it's an absolutely fascinating thing. It's when, so, and I think this is, so I'll come back full circle to my objection largely today with data science as it's known. Data science as it's known today is about largely statistics. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, except you don't know that it's a needle. You're looking at a haystack and saying, tell me, is there something in here that shouldn't be in here? And you find that there's a thing there, but you don't know what it is. But if you know you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you come at it in an entirely different way, and you still find the needle, and you may find it quicker, you may not, which is why for me, data interrogation, interpretation, and manipulation are my key tools. I mean, I can do, you know, some of the numpy stuff and things like that, but to be honest with you, it doesn't interest me, because all I'm doing is it's like chucking a net into the water. Let's see what I can catch. Oh, look at this. This is a shell. This is it might be a fish. This is something else. What was I looking for in the first place? Well, I don't know. I was just looking for things. I want to send a big magnet into the sea and pull up a great big lump of metal that I think has been dropped from a ship here. It's not a random thing. It's something I'm going looking for. So that, yeah, that's my objection. And, you know, you recruiters, Billy, you've got a lot to answer for with all your bloody silly job descriptions, because I know full well that the organizations are not saying to you, oh, what I need is someone who can do this and that and Python this and everything else. You're just putting the words down for them.
No, we're the dark side. It's all our fault.
Anyway, come the revolution, hey, Mirella.
I'm looking forward. Actually, thank you so much for touching this point about agencies. I don't even know how to call them. First of all, I put myself in the shoe of Billy, and 3 of his colleagues already have called me. And I kind of wonder, what is, like you rightly said, Jeremy, what do you want? I mean, I need specificity. I understand that I need somebody to look into the matter, but exactly be as precise as you can be. I love data analytics as well. I won't go into modeling, you know, maybe just to get more insights from the data. But I would like somebody to narrow it to me, like okay, this job, BI analyst, is about just maybe dashboard storytelling. This is what I want from you. Instead, I get a lot of things there, like mixed language. Like exactly, I already got the skill to look at some jobs and say, nah, this is not for me. These people.
I'm with you entirely there. I think, you know, if someone said to me, I want you to come in, have a look at all of my data feeds and tell me where I can improve my operations and sell more and make more money. And you've got free reign for 3 months to come up with your plan. And you've got access to all the data and everything else. I'd be like a pig in shit. It would just, you know, because you just go in and you say, okay, if I was running this business, I'd want to do this, I want to do that, speak to the CEO, what do you want to achieve? Go and look at the data that sits behind the strategy. You'd be there in 5 minutes. Coming at it from let's just look at the data and see what all the anomalies are, you know, all the bits of string and shells and pebbles and things that look like fish, etc. It may be of use, if someone says, oh my goodness, there's a market for bits of string, great. But I think you have to, I mean, I'm an accidental data scientist. I was actually a corporate lending banker at the beginning of my career. And I used to get called, so this would be in the early 90s, so I was called a hybrid because I had a business brain, but I had the ability to get stuck into data and understand what it was telling me, and to understand what needed to be done to make things better. So that sort of hybrid mentality, whether it's finance, whether it's process, whether it's whatever it is, if you can bring that with data skills, and that may well include some of the more esoteric programming languages, as long as you're coming at it with a business focus, as opposed to saying, I am a pointy head statistician, I know nothing about finance, I know nothing about the business, but I'm going to find you some things that are interesting, outliers, anomalies, all the rest of it.
And
okay.
The funniest, yes, and the funniest thing is that when you tell people, let's say you are the good guy and you go and tell them, look, I just had a look at everything and I believe you could improve here and here. From my experience, recent experience, it takes one to know one. Yeah. People need to know at least, to have almost at least, if not, you are just talking alone. Yeah. You wasted the time. Yeah. So even if they give you a narrow field, let's say. Yeah. Unless they have a bit of a, and Cecile, we have this situation on and on, people not knowing exactly what to do, because it's in the beginning of the breakthrough. Yeah. Like IoT devices, there's a myriad of applications, but we are just beginning to use them, you know? So anyway, where can we buy this product? I'm a physicist, by the way. All right. Background in physics. And I would like to tell you, congratulations. According to the fractal theory, whatever happens to you is the best thing that could have happened. Yeah. And you are not there by accident. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you all this afternoon.
No, I really appreciate everyone coming out, especially on a Friday afternoon, sunny Friday afternoon. I think a good place to sum up is, or to wrap up, is that recruiters, it's our fault, and we've ruined data science.
Hey, it was nice talking to you all.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes.